So, all right, let's get started. So the presentation is gardening in carceral settings across the United States. And we are very fortunate to have a large team here representing a number of programs and projects from across the country. And I will start by introducing Rima Green, who is the director of Let Us Grow program at Growing Gardens, and she will introduce the rest of her team. So welcome and thank you for joining us. Rima, we can't hear you. You can unmute. Yeah.
Hello. It's great to see all these people. When we started working 10 years ago, I think there were 4 organizations. So it's wonderful to see all these people involved now. We represent 3 different groups, and our presenters are Daniela, Sharon Everhardt, Mirabai Collins, Stephen Carmody, Brenda Gill, and Andrea Blackwood. Basically, we are 3 different organizations that face 3 different aspects of the carceral system, and we are at different levels of maturity. And we have actually been talking for close to a year now about the function of different organizations and what we can do to support each other. And we're planning to have a general discussion about what each group does, and then we'll take questions. So hang in there, and thank you for attending. Hi, I'm from the Let Us Grow program. I'm the director. We started in 2010, and we're currently in 16 adult and juvenile correctional facilities across the state of Oregon. On an average, we have 200 students per year are enrolled in our program. Along with providing classes, our volunteers work in the garden side by side with the inmates, and we provide hands-on and practical gardening instruction and friendship to incarcerated individuals. In the youth facilities, as well as teach classes, we build garden boxes, which give youthful offenders the opportunity to have a full gardening experience, which will enhance their appreciation of gardening and the natural world. Because we work in a lot of different situations, we adapt our program to the situation. In one facility, we'll do one thing, and you'll see in the slides, and in another facility, we do another one. So let's go. That's just the list of the places we are. And primarily, we are in the adult system, the adult state system, but we also work with the federal site in Sheridan and several youth facilities at Yamhill County Juvenile Corrections. And we now have 1 regional reentry group. I feel kind of in a wonderful position because we were let back into one of our facilities last Thursday. We actually went in for the first time since January. So it started, yay! They sent me an email and said, you guys can come in if you want. We were there the next day. Yeah. So I primarily have a lot of pictures. And what people don't realize is that in the state system and the federal system here, they grow a great deal of their own food. Last year, the Oregon State Correctional System grew 365,000 pounds of food. 10,000 pounds went to food banks and other local groups, but the majority of it, 96% of it, is now being consumed internally in the system, which is fantastic from my opinion, because prison food is so awful. The fact that they have fresh produce in seasons for about 5 months is a huge help. We've been looking at, over the last 10 years, the amount that they consume and do not go away has been going up and up, which is great in my opinion. The food banks are not thrilled with it, but Oregon spends $1.39 per day to feed an inmate. It's very grim. So this is one of the greenhouses, and we'll flip to another one so you can get an idea of the size of some of these garden spaces. This is Powder River in Baker City, and you can see this garden is inside of the fence line. Some of them are not. Okay, and the next one is, this is Snake River. Snake River is cultivating about 10 acres now, and they are on the border with Idaho. And this is a really tough area because the wind blows across there. And what they've done is they've taken the buckets, the tote buckets that they get from food services, and they actually use them as cloches just because the wind runs through there. And they grow a huge amount of food. This is the minimum facilities outside of the wall garden. And they grow about 20 to 30,000 pounds of food a year. Okay, this is some of our juvenile work. Yamhill County is one of our smaller counties, and their juvenile detention is actually the top floor of the jail. And they have no access to the outside. So juveniles can be held there for up to 9 months without ever seeing the outside. The classroom there has no lights, it's no windows. So what we did was we built these light shelves and we secured them to the walls. And you can't see it here, but there's mesh that covers all the lights. So they actually are growing starts in the juvenile detention, which then get taken out to the probationary farm, get planted in the garden, and some of the food actually comes back into the juvenile detention facility. So they've set up this very reciprocal way of doing things. And they grow a lot of sprouts and things because the kids in juvenile detention are essentially eating jail food, which is one step down from prison food. It's like bologna sandwiches twice a day. So we've been able to work down there. We built a greenhouse. That's McLaren, where we actually, the kids themselves, we helped them, and we actually did indeed build they built all their boxes. So this group is a group for children with identified mental issues. So they are segregated. So all of their boxes went into the yard abutting their residence. And they went from being the retards to being the cool kids that had their own garden, and they were all thrilled. So this is Coffee Creek. This is the only women's correctional correctional facility we have in the state of Oregon. They have a 12,000 square foot garden where they grow a significant portion of their own vegetables. And this this part of the garden is actually, it's a quadrangle. And anytime you walk out of a building, you walk into a garden. You have to walk around the building to go from gardens to gardens. In the summer, this is gorgeous. This looks nothing like a prison. Well, it looks like a prison when you get into a unit, but to walk out and to be in a garden, it's very interesting to see, because the building you're looking at is the residence. There's 5 residential units, and you can see people come out of the building and visibly relax when they hit the garden. There's this actual relaxation that happens. And this year we're putting in an area with grass so people can actually sit on the grass, because right now there's no place to sit but at benches on concrete. So I'm going to flip. Now this is a garden we built in Brazil in partnership with the State Department and the Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative. We had a lady from Echo Amor who came here, who works with a group that works in schools and juvenile facilities. And I went to Brazil for 2 weeks, and we built a half-acre garden in a juvenile facility. And it was very interesting. I had never seen incarceration outside of the United States. It's pretty horrible. 20-foot, that wall is 20 feet tall, and the guards all have automatic weapons, and they have 300 children there. When we walked in, the comment was, we had this flowered garden arranged, we're gonna have all these flowers, and the staff said, no, we need food. So they got 3/4 of an acre of food. And interestingly enough, half goes into the facility to use in the kitchen, and the other half is sold because the state government does not provide a clothing allowance for the kids. So the facility uses half of the money to buy shoes for the kids. It's a very interesting situation. We are hopefully when things clear up, we're going to go back and do the same thing in 2 other facilities. Okay, so we provide a number of classes for facilities. We provide the Oregon Food Bank has a basic class, which is called Seed to Supper, which is a very basic gardening class. OSU has provided us with the academic portion of the Master Gardeners program, which we call Sustainable Gardening. This is an 11 to 12-week in-depth gardening class, which gives you a certificate of home horticulture from OSU, which is a job credential in the state of Oregon. So a number of our students take it and are able to use this to get themselves for a job, to get jobs afterwards. We also teach a greenhouse management class, which we developed with Chemeketa Community College. Essentially, they gave us their class material and we redesign it and repackage it so it's acceptable in a correctional facility. This is also a certification class, so you will get a certificate. I have one student who is now working in Southern Oregon in the greenhouse that provides orchids to all the Kroger stores, based on the fact that she had a certification in greenhouse management. We have a culinary arts program, and which we're revisiting because a lot of our restaurant industry has collapsed because of the COVID situation. Since 2010, over 1,250 incarcerated individuals have taken one or more of our classes, and we continue to follow them because we track recidivism with the help of the State Department of Correction and the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So, okay, I like pictures. These are some of our graduates of various programs. And our programs, aside from Seed to Supper, are basically freshman level college programs. And the expectation is that people spend about 5 hours a week working on their work. And I think we've only had 3 people who have not got certifications, and 2 of them retook the classes and got their certifications. We are flexing whatever a facility will allow us. Some of the classes do not run in all the facilities, but we work continually with facilities, essentially saying, here, this didn't create a problem, now can we run a greenhouse class? All of our classes are designed to be given in classroom and not necessarily use a lot of equipment, because you start with as little as possible in terms of creating a situation. But now we're doing plant diagnostics, we're doing greenhouse planning. And again, some facilities have CAD machines. The federal facility has a CAD machine. So people's final project is design a greenhouse. And I've had them done on graph paper. I've had them done on CAD machines. So just more people. Again, this is Columbia River, and we have this is the back of the facility where they actually took up the concrete to build the garden. Okay, and those are all our partners, and basically anybody who will help us. We get a lot of our classes. We end up doing a lot of reprocessing of material, because it has to be on specific formats to run in the Department of Correction. We have no internet connections. Inmates can't handle computers, so everything needs to be modified, and we manage to produce a lot of stuff. We're constantly looking for more material, And generally, I will share material with anybody who is interested in anything where I can. I can share everything other than the OSU material without the permission of OSU. So if anybody's interested in any of this, please get a hold of us. One of our volunteers, we work primarily with volunteers, and I'm a big believer in volunteers. As nice as it would be to have a lot of staff, I believe that there's a huge value of bringing volunteers in. So our students tend to view it as the outside world coming in, because everybody knows how difficult it is to get into a correctional facility. And even a badged volunteer, we tend to get, we'll get hung up in security because the metal detectors found something, and you go through the dance. So I'm a big believer in volunteers from the community. We have 32 across the state. They go everywhere from master gardeners to organic farmers to Oregon tilth people to extension people. And I just think that I feel that it changes the tenure of the whole facility when you have people from the outside in. They are essentially, to me, witnesses, as well as people offering friendship, and things just change when there are other people from the outside are in the facilities. I don't know how many people have experienced it, that everything gets a little less aggressive when you have volunteers from the outside. And it really hasn't changed much in the tenure of, it just changes the whole facility. And so we deal with everybody. And also we certify all our volunteers. We handle the certifications because you were required to be trained by the Department of Correction as well as by us. So in 2020, the state system grew 365,000 pounds of food. 97% of the food is now used in the kitchens. This is a 12% increase in internal consumption year over year. The federal system grew 100,000 pounds of food strictly for internal consumption. As I said, we've been tracking some of our former students for up to 10 years, and the recidivism rate for our students is 4%. And in the Oregon State Correctional System, the recidivism rate is 31%. Who knew gardening is good for people? Just more guys in the rain. It rains a lot here. And it doesn't seem to matter. This is one of our volunteers, and here's somebody who had never actually smelled cilantro before. We have these very interesting experiences with people who have had no exposure to gardens before. One of these gentlemen is a leader of a gang, and who actually avoided being in a fight because he wanted to stay in the class, which totally shocked he was in a class, and one of the other gang members got into an altercation with the staff, and they were just waiting for him to come out of the classroom, and he chose to sit there. Totally shocked the security staff. And we had some actual dialogue with the security staff about maybe he was more concerned with remaining in the program than, engaging in negative behavior. And we had a learning moment with staff at that point. Okay, so where are we with COVID? March of 2020, the state correctional system barred all visitors and volunteers, and that is still in effect. OIA permits only family visits. Sheridan's permitting limited visitation. In the state system, now it's changed a little bit. 6 of the 14 sites are still locked down. And we are working in a hybrid model. In some site staff are giving the classes, and they're being supported by their volunteer who's answering questions. And we've also developed a fair amount of self-study curriculum, which for Seed to Supper and for the greenhouse class, so people can continue working with us. Technically, my staff and I are considered contractors. We have a contract with the DOC. They do not pay us, they give that, but we have a contract, so we are contractors, which allows us a lot more freedom. And while our volunteers can't go in, we can go in, and we are providing the classes ourselves, where normally volunteers would in 2 sites locally. And as I said, we got back in for the first time since January, last Thursday. And the women hadn't seen anybody since they hadn't seen anybody from the outside since January. So we had a bunch of very happy campers to see us come back. I'm going to hand it over to Sharon, who's going to talk about Tutwiler.
Hello, everyone. I guess I'll just start with a brief background of who I am. My name is Sharon Everhardt. I'm Associate Professor of Sociology at Troy University and also a department chair. And in my spare time, this is my labor of love, along with my colleagues, Dr. Brenda Gill and Dr. Stephen Carmody. So Tutwiler is a pretty interesting place to work. It is a 850 bed maximum security facility. It is the only one for women in the state of Alabama. Participation in our garden program is completely voluntary. We leave it open to any woman who is interested in joining us. Thus far, we've had about 60 prisoners join our program, but at this point, due to COVID and a number of other setbacks, we've had about 13 students graduate out of our program. Under normal circumstances, we offer weekly classes to women. As far as the types of women we serve, in terms of their sentencing, it can be anywhere from just a couple of months to multiple life sentences. At this point, the woman with the longest sentence in our program, she's been sentenced to 1,000 years. So for women like this really is a lifeline for them. Although anything can change with the idea that you're never getting out, oftentimes educational programming is very restrictive. And we intentionally leave ours open for any woman who feels that she could benefit from being part of our program. Women can enroll in gardening classes. As of now, we have 2 gardening classes. One is a basic course, kind of like the Seed to Supper programming that Rima and her crew in Oregon provide. And then we also just developed an advanced garden curriculum and course for the women who would like to continue. They earn certificates from Troy University that become part of their official DOC record. And unlike Let Us Grow, we are a fairly young program. We've only been in operation for 2 years. And out of that 2 years, unfortunately, 1 year has been spent with COVID. We, in 2019, we were able to grow over 2,000 pounds of food. And while compared to Rima and what Oregon is doing, it seems so small, but that was huge for us because that was our first real year of harvest. And all the food goes completely for prison consumption. So it goes to the main facility. So this gives you a snapshot of what we're working with. You'll notice in this picture a bunch of PVC piping that we use to support squash and other growing types of crops, since we couldn't get approval for your standard metal cage and that sort of thing. The aim of our program is really to teach food insecure inmates how to grow their own food and what the nutritional benefits of doing that are for them in self-sustaining ways, or at least as self-sustaining as we can get within a prison environment. An additional aim of our program is to provide women with horticultural skills and credentials, that being in the form of certificates from Troy University, that can assist them in securing employment upon release, should they be released. And if we get them released, the goal is to keep them out. Next slide, please. Thanks. This sign holds a lot of significance. This is one of the ways in which we try to provide our participants with as much agency as we can give them. They named the garden, and in their honor, we got them this sign. And now it just really speaks volumes as to what they've been through, not only in trying to survive Tutwiler, but also with trying to ensure that this program continues despite the fact that we are still not able to get in. We have not been inside of Tutwiler since March of 2020, and it was all through the women's efforts inside of Tutwiler that has kept it alive. So there is no better name. They hit that right on the spot. Here's an example of some of the food that the women chose to grow for themselves. Again, you heard me mention agency. That's really important to our group. We try not to tell them what they're going to do. They hear enough of that all day long and all night long. And so we give them their choices. They select what they would like to grow. We get them the resources and they do the work. So what you're looking at is collards, which in Alabama are a highly coveted crop, but also it's a superfood. So out of all the things we could take up space growing nutritionally wise, this is probably one of the best things that we could provide the women, in addition to trying to provide them with agency. And, you know, much like Rima talked about, although the pictures, unfortunately, I don't have the freedom to capture pictures of women in the same way. So you're mainly being, you know, I'm mainly focusing on crops here. But we've had many of the same types of experiences where we had a woman who was beside herself because she was able to eat a blueberry one day, and that was the first time in 15 years. We experienced lots of women that, although they've lived in Alabama their whole lives, and Alabama is by and large an agricultural state, they've never actually been able to put a plant in the ground, never had the opportunity, let alone to harvest anything. So while we can look at this picture and just assume, well, this is a green pepper, to the women who have grown it, it represents far more than just a green pepper. It represents the ability to make decisions for themselves in what they grow and what they consume, which is a pretty powerful thing in a place that gives you no agency. And here you see radishes. And all of these, it makes me smile because I can immediately think to the reactions when I was there taking the picture from the women, because Alabama has a very rocky past when it comes to feeding inmates. I should have actually told you in the very beginning of this talk that what started this program was actually our team reading about a little known rule and law in the state of Alabama. Until 2018, sheriffs were allowed to keep the proceeds from their food budgets. So if they could keep it under a certain amount, whatever proceeds they had, they could literally put that in their own pockets. And so in 2017, when we started thinking about this project, initially there was a report, a sheriff in South Alabama actually built himself a $750,000 beach house with the proceeds of feeding his inmates things like corn dogs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so the idea of bringing in fresh produce is, you know, a game changer for these women. And so I'm happy to report that law has now been disbanded, and sheriffs are not allowed to keep the money anymore. But, you know, on a weekly basis without COVID, we see what's going on their plates. And unless you're on a quote unquote wellness diet, you're not going to see any fresh vegetables at all. And so the only access that many of our women would have to fresh vegetables is what we're able to provide and what they grow for themselves. So what you see, you actually see the back of me in this picture. This is their dining hall that also doubles as our classroom, if you can imagine that. Anybody teaching inside of a prison knows that it can be especially challenging. I consider myself a veteran teacher at the start of this project, and I have to say that all the disruptions that come with prison life were hard to adjust to as a teacher. One of the things that we figured out fairly quickly into this program was that women didn't just need assistance with understanding crops and grow cycles and crop rotation and those sorts of things that are vital to growing, but they also needed an opportunity to talk about things like communication and as this whiteboard suggests, different types of expressions. And so at several points in the last 2 years, we have had to maybe readjust or recalibrate what we're doing and how we're handling it to respond to whatever the needs are. So in this case, you see me teaching a lesson on expressions that resulted from some intergroup conflict and trying to find healthy ways to deal with that conflict inside of our garden program.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. So this was the fall 2019 harvest of broccoli. Again, you could just look at this and say it's a bunch of broccoli, but this is huge to them. You know, we've all heard the stories of prison innovation, but my goodness, the things that they can do with some fresh produce is amazing. So this actually ended up being lunch one day, and I believe they got access to some Cheese Whiz and didn't like what was on the lunch menu, so they elected just to eat broccoli with some Cheese Whiz and cook it in the microwave. One of the things that we noticed upon entering Tutwiler is the lack of beautified space. And so we created, alongside the women, this reflection garden. And I'm happy to report that this is probably the most popular bench in the entire facility. There's somebody always on it as soon as we pull up and we're entering. So we've really tried to invest not just in their, you know, what they're consuming, but also what they're seeing, what they're smelling, what they're feeling. And that's just grown from there. We've actually, as a side project, redid their entire library with the help of donors because their library selection was so sad. You know, books that were 15, 20 years old that they sometimes had read 10 times. And so, you know, alongside of the garden program, you know, of course, we're all educators. And so libraries make us happy and we get excited when we see other people getting excited over books. And so right after we redid the library initially, there was a 5-hour wait to get in the library because they knew there was some good stuff in there. And we just continue to add to it. And I think it was Rima had mentioned something about the importance of, you know, trying to work cooperatively with corrections. This is one of our garden liaisons, Lieutenant Thornton, And, you know, this is a huge deal. This may not seem by the picture like this is a big deal, but the way that we started this program wasn't with Tutwiler coming to us saying, will you please start a garden program? Instead, as I explained, out of reading about sheriffs abusing their power and building themselves beach houses in Alabama, we felt compelled to act. And so we went to the top of the DOC chain in Alabama to get permission. And so while that was probably great for cutting some bureaucratic red tape, we then had to work to get buy-in from the actual institution itself, from the wardens all the way down to the correctional officers. And so Lieutenant Thornton in this picture represents a pivotal moment for us when we went from being seen as outsiders with an agenda and people being skeptical of us to slowly starting to embed in the culture of the institution and gaining some acceptance. That doesn't mean that we're totally 100% problem solved for our programming within the institution, but this was a pivotal moment for us. And so we try to make graduation for these women a big deal. And so the guy in the suit is actually our senior vice chancellor of academic affairs at Troy University. And with some talking, I talked him into actually coming to the facility and issuing the certificate so they could really feel like this is a graduation. We really work to try to help the women work on future goals and understanding that while they may experience setbacks, that we're here to help them with that. And what we would like, of course, as educators is that in some way, shape, or form that they continue their education. And for those that want it, we have got Troy to agree that on a case-by-case basis for any woman that graduates from our gardening program, Troy will consider for admission. So what has COVID done to our program? Classes have been on hold since March of 2020. Unlike Rima and Mirabai in Oregon, we do not feel like we are embedded enough in the institution yet to do self-guided study. What we are a little afraid of with that, although we've considered it, is we want to make sure that we are allowed back in and that they don't see it as, well, they don't need to be here for the classes. Because the women really look forward to our visits. As I said, some of the women in our program have multiple life sentences. You know, the longer you are incarcerated, oftentimes you lose support from the outside. And so in some cases, we are the only support they have. And so we want to make sure that we're able to get back in and stay in. And so we made the hard decision just to hold out and wait to get back in to start our programming back up. However, we have continued the gardens themselves. So we are able to go and do drop-off visits, which we just did one last week. We're going to do another one next Friday where we're dropping off crops and supplies, and they allow us to give them instructions through the fence. So that's what we do. Some of the other setbacks is the loss of data. That's one of our ongoing challenges without COVID. Now that COVID's here, it's just been impossible. So I know they're harvesting, I know they're growing, but we're really relying on a very disjointed place, very chaotic place to provide us with data, and it doesn't always happen. So we've had some data loss, unfortunately. So our next steps are, we're working really hard to try to get back in. In the meantime, we constantly remind them that we're not going anywhere. And we mainly do that through drop-off visits. We in the future, we'd really like to build a network of employers for job placement. We're slowly doing that in an organic fashion, but it would be really nice to really have a compelling list from every aspect or every area of the state, because one of the things, unfortunately, that makes it very hard to be working in Alabama is the reentry system is basically non-existent here. You get $10 and a bus ticket. That's all you get. We also are always working on fundraising, and we actually haven't even done one single public announcement. This is probably the most public announcement we've made about our program. We've just quietly worked for 2 years on this program, and fortunately, COVID contributed to why more people don't know about what we're doing. And, you know, we have the goal of, we really want to embed the garden program in the institution and the culture, the way in which you heard Rima speak about Let Us Grow and how they're embedded in, I think, over 14 institutions in Oregon. I don't know if we can be I don't know if we can be that ambitious, but if we could just get them to see us as part of Tutwiler, that would be fantastic. And, you know, continuing to improve the garden infrastructure. And I think, yep, that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sharon. My name is Jauk. You have now traveled from Oregon to the south of the United States with me. You are landing in Akron, Ohio, northeastern Ohio. I am an assistant professor for sociology and criminal justice at the University of Akron. I am presenting today with Dr. Andrea Blackwood. You will meet a little bit later. When I started that garden work, Serenity in the Garden is our garden project, also named by the women who are working the garden. When I started that project, I was not an assistant professor. I had just started a brand new job as a clinical sociologist. That means a sociologist that is doing hands-on work, not behind the desk in a college, for a large community corrections provider in Northeast Ohio, Oriana House. I had just started that job. I ran into my friend Sharon at a sociology conference, and she told me about her new project in the Tutwiler prison. I was fascinated because in my role as a research specialist for that agency, I was looking at exit evaluations of clients from in residential community correction settings. And there was two topics very prominent. One, the food is crap. And I'm so glad that Leslie Sobel is in the house and has a presentation, because this is such an important report and such an important intervention to talk about the food quality. And women have too much downtime in facilities. So a garden seemed like a perfect intervention, a sociological intervention to address these issues. So I'm working in a different setting. I'm working in a community-based correctional facility with an average of 215 intakes a year. That is a more transitional population. You have heard from Sharon, there is a women with 1,000 years sentence. Here, I'm working with women that are typically staying anywhere from 4 to 6 months, up to 9 months. They are receiving treatment. Many of them have a substance use history. And I started a pilot garden program in 2019. Andrea helped me develop that and then took over as a garden director when I was transitioning out to the University of Akron. Ohio has a very short growing season in comparison to Alabama, and we were setting it up as a 3-seasonal education program, each season about 10 to 12 weeks of educational classes. With an open enrollment, people could just drop in. But if you got 8 out of 12 classes, there was a certificate, a take-home grow kit women were very stoked about, and a certificate. So there was the pilot program ran in 2019. And as I transitioned to the University of Akron, I then started to do an IRB protocol and systematic research. So you have seen that we have women between 24 and 36 years of age. That's the median, the most prominent age group in this facility. It also happens to be the age group that is the most in poverty in our area. Exacerbated even if you are a woman between 26 and 34 that is brown or black. You have about double the poverty rate of the national average. And that also is a background for this project, because the women who are criminal justice involved come from home communities that are food deserts. They come from poverty, and Lacan has called that we are incarcerating poverty, no? On a larger scale. Also, it's often women who do the food and the care work in their communities. Ohio is an agricultural state. There is definitely a garden program, garden training, as Rima suggested, can definitely bring job skills that can be applied. For the agency, it's interesting that it is a pro-social activity. We can address downtime. It's structured leisure time in residential community correction settings, and you can include family and children. That is really important, because we know that women in the 60% of women in prisons in the United States have children under the age of 18. That extends to the community correction setting. And in Akron, we have a very lively urban gardening. This is an urban context. We have an urban gardening scene. We have one agency that runs about 100, a nonprofit runs about 100 community gardens, and has also been offering community service to female residents in that community correction setting. So there is a nice inside and out connection we also wanted to make with this inside garden. Let's Grow Akron is this agency running community gardens. They helped us establish this inside garden and also extended the community service outside. Also, we partnered up with the Master Gardeners of Summit County, our OSU, Ohio State Extension Office, and Oriana House, the agency I was working for, and the University of Akron. We are working on this together. And I think it's also so important to open up correctional facilities. No? As Rima also said, to bring community into the facility, to get the women out. That's what we can do in Ohio, and to improve their social capital and social networks. So I'm doing this in a feminist sociology framework, in a clinical feminist sociology framework. Just very briefly, we have to consider, it's important for me to work with women because we are in this macro system that privileges white males. We have a gender order in place that is also mirrored in the penal system, where programming for women is scarce. Often located in basements in Ohio. Sometimes women don't even have programming rooms in jails and prisons in Ohio. Yeah, that's why it is important from a feminist perspective for me to provide specifically something for women in this system that is characterized by hyper-incarceration. So for me, like for Sharon too, and for many of us, for me it's important to empower the clients. And for the agency, it was important to address that structured leisure time, yeah, to give them more programming. They also, let's be honest, they can sell to their auditing organs, yeah. In the long run, and that's why I'm sort of also engaged in this research, is in the long run, it will be really interesting to produce more research, to really get gardening, that's my goal, but maybe you can critique me, to make gardening an evidence-based practice in corrections, to really connect this to dosage hours, to show with systematic and comparative research that this makes sense and this can be embraced in more correctional settings. I am giving it to Andrea, who will tell you what actually happened in the garden.
Hi, my name is Andrea Blackwood, Dr. Andrea Blackwood, and when Danny left for the University of Akron, I took over her role at Oriana House. I'm a social research scientist as well, but Danny did the research end of this, and I did the sort of director and chief organizer of this program. So my role as director and chief organizer was to make sure that the program had a curriculum to follow and that the clients had the tools that they needed, and the staff and volunteers and clients were prepared for each of the weekly sessions. And that was much harder than you might expect. The goals for the program overall were really simple. We wanted to get the ladies outside for some structured leisure time and to get them working individually and in teams, doing something physical. There's a lot of sitting around, as you well know, just to get out there and get moving. We also wanted to build some self-esteem and some self-efficacy, and in the process, learn about gardening and nutrition. All the weekly sessions were about an hour and a half long, and all had easy to follow lesson plans that were printed out and handed out. We also had discussion and journal writing as well. So at the end of the session programming, you had a graduation certificate and a grow kit, like Danny said, and those were given to those who completed the program. And it was always open to anybody that wanted to join in, whether it was just for 1 or 2 sessions or for all of them. There was no limiting the women when they were gardening. The next few slides are some examples of lessons and projects that we experimented with in our first pilot season. We had, like Danny said, a volunteer organization help us through the process. The pilot program started the first building a no-till lasagna. Can you back up, please, Danny? Please. Yeah, so this is our lasagna garden beds. Let's Go Akron came in and they taught the ladies how to put down some cardboard and to build these frames. It was very hands-on. Everybody got a little dirty to fill it with layers of green and compost and garden soil. And it looks kind of strange on the top because there is a juice store that did wheatgrass juice, and they gave us these mats of the end products of the growing of the wheatgrass. And so we put that out as a layer on top that prevented weeds growing. And we took these tulip bulbs and we made these holes and planted our plants in between them. It was actually really fabulous. It was really no weed, no till. Next slide, please. And then the next class was about seed starting with simple materials, toilet paper rolls, seed soil mix, and some fluorescent lighting on some tables. And then again, there were some instruction sheets and some volunteers to help. So this is a much, much smaller program than the other two. It is just one facility. The facility itself, like Danny said, holds between 150 to 200 women a year. And so it was really more or less testing the waters to see how well a program like this would be embraced and how these women would respond to it. Next slide, please. We also focused on gardening in small urban spaces to show our clients that they didn't need a yard or a traditional garden to grow vegetables. So once they were out of the facility, they could take what they learned and use it in a way that was meaningful to them. So we grew some potatoes and tires and some herbs in shoe trees, and both the projects were highly successful. There was a lot of potatoes and a lot of herbs, and that inspired the clients to come up with other ideas for container growing in small spaces. And so they really appreciated the fact that even in an apartment or a very, very tiny space, that they could actually have a successful garden. Thank you. We also grew herbs and flowers in a pallet up against a wall. Again, we were just experimenting with all different kinds of urban gardening ideas, and we grew tomatoes and kale and cabbages and beans and peppers and strawberries. And we had botanists and master gardeners come in to give talks on issues like blight and bug infestations when that happened as well. So this was a highly experimental first season. It went over really well. The ladies really enjoyed it. And everybody learned a great deal. We also grew herbs and flowers. Oh, and in the fall, we had a seed saving party to help start the garden for the following year. And here we're saving broccoli seeds. Broccoli went to flower, and we taught them all about that. And again, there was handouts. And then we went outside, and there was a bunch of other seeds, and we sort of threw them up in the air to see what would happen. So there was a lot of joy in this garden. There's, again, a lot of ladies just sitting around. So to get out and become involved and learn how to work as a team, to meet people from the outside, to bring in families for graduation, it was hugely beneficial and very satisfying for both Danny and myself, and also the staff and the ladies. So the pilot was so successful the following year, we added another row of beds. This year we created a more formal workbook with lesson plans and writing prompts and definitions and some puzzles. And the few classes that we got in during COVID indicated that the workbook was a great tool and that the clients really enjoyed the outside work and the homework involved too that was part of these lessons. So it just goes to show that you could, even in a very tiny facility, gardening can be a huge benefit for everyone involved.
So in total, we reached 116 women that were in some shape or form involved in the garden program, and 63 women came more than 3 times, yeah, or participated in at least 3 gardening lessons. What you see here in the photograph is Jacqueline Kowalski. She's the Master Garden Coordinator, and she's probably just giving a botany lesson. She has brought these plants in the left front. And as Andrea said, the women were full of gratitude that someone would take the time. They very often said, wow, thank you for taking the time for us, for them to enjoy outside. And they also related, many of these women, as I told you, have a substance use history. They related the garden a lot to their own recovery, yeah? And to their own biography. And it was just plain fun. And the preliminary results. So we developed a research design, and it was really drawn out. I even brought you a timetable. I had a focus group with clients. I had a participatory research design workshop with facility administration, facility managers, with all the community partners and researchers. We used design thinking methods. We developed this awesome evaluation program. And I have a IRB protocol for that. But really, thanks to COVID, I never really got to try that out. So what I have, though, is qualitative data I could use for, and we had invited women to write out reflection questions and reflection statements after each gardening lesson. This is anonymized data. I have some field notes from ethnographic participant observation that I have started to interview community partners and staff and people who were involved with the gardening program. The results, this is not going to be a surprise for you. We know, you knew that, you heard that. It's just important, I think, that we are writing up systematic research about it, as others have done before us, to substantiate more and broader use of gardening in corrections. So what I find in my preliminary analysis is effects on mental health. It's like therapy, women say. It's a coping skill. It helps relax. Substance use history, clients take it as a helpful metaphor for recovery, and they relate it often also to Alcoholics Anonymous terminology, how they are weeding out their own personalities from unhelpful traits, or weeding out their lives from unhelpful contacts. And it's just a space of empowerment, self-efficacy, as Andrea said. It has definite effects on physical health. It grants them physical activity they would otherwise not have. In this particular facility, for example, women get one rec time, outside time, once a week. Now the garden was a great opportunity for them to go out more often. We also see that they had access to more nutritious food in the facility. And if I read the report by Sobel and team, this is exactly what these women said. At this food in this facility, I would not feed it to my dog. It's so bad. So there was a lot of snacking going on in the facility, right from the garden bed. And we were gonna expand that, and Andrea had organized a portable sink and expand and integrate it with nutrition classes. The extension office was also bringing into the facility. And women were anticipating growing their own food. Some women come with gardening experience. For some, it's nothing new. For some, it is completely new. They have never really seen a beet grow. And many women said, I will grow it, I will try it, especially now that they know this very low cost or no cost options of urban gardening that are relevant, yeah, in our area. And it has effects on social interaction. The women have fun together, so the client interactions improved, and the staff-client interactions. Now, staff is a problem. You already heard that between the lines. In my setting, facilities are always understaffed. This is a problem for programming because facility management will tell you, we don't have the staff to supervise you in the garden, so you cannot do it. Now, Andrea was a great inside person and had more authority. We did not need staff, and that was also good, this space for women where they could be unsupervised, quote unquote. But when staff interacted, it was great. There was a lot of fun, and I brought you a picture a little bit later. And if they get, and with guest speakers, or even if they can do community service, they can build pro-social networks outside the facility and get to know new people. So here is my fancy research plan that I drew out, the 3 seasonal curriculum we were gonna evaluate with qualitative methods and also develop a quantitative instrument based on this qualitative analysis. I got to do the focus group with clients and the planning workshop, and then COVID happened. No? That was it for the last year. The garden was shut down. Nothing happened in Ohio. Actually, face-to-face research is still outlawed. Basically, there is a governor's order. I can only do virtual research. And for 1 month, there was a life in the garden for 1 month. Last August, we did 5 gardening sessions. You see Andrea here doing a soil test. We had some volunteers from last year. That was fun to explore what is coming up. We planted some beets and fast-growing seeds. And here you see there is a staff member with a walkie-talkie. And the staff member was building this compost tumbler for an hour. It was a really elaborate project. They had so much fun. This was such a good time in a very confined environment. Yeah, very therapeutic for rapport. Also, I would argue, if rapport is essential for all correctional programming and evidence-based practices, right? That would be. So what are the next steps? The garden in the women's facility is on hold right now. The women's facility is not accessible. However, a little virtual gardening program started up with the same community partner, Let's Grow Akron, in a different residential community corrections facility for male clients with mental health issues. And I get to participate there, and hopefully we can get out in the garden, in this new garden that is emerging. Hopefully we can get out next week, actually. We will work to get this CBCF, the women's garden, back up, but it has become more difficult because Andrea also has changed positions, and there is no, right now I'm not seeing that strong internal champion yet, but we'll see. I am still doing expert interviews with staff and management. I'm sort of still soliciting interviews. I'm scouting out new sites for evaluation research in Ohio. I have a couple new contacts of large horticultural programs in a women's prison in Cleveland. And I'm in this larger collaboration project with Alabama, with Sharon, where we are gathering national expert interviews, and some of you we have probably talked to, where we try to gain a bigger understanding of what's going on, and this conference is just awesome. And I also want to conclude by saying thank you to Rima and Sharon, who really have both, in the spirit of feminist solidarity, shared everything they had, and I'm sharing back, and this is just a beautiful space of collaboration that now has just become so much bigger thanks to Matt and team. I give it back to Rima.
Okay, it's very interesting because as I said, we're like 3 different programs, different states of maturity in different locations, and you come up with things that run through all these programs. You know, when we talk about it, one of the big ones, and these are the standard ones, so I'm about to go off into a little bit of there. Agency, being able to offer inmates agency is a huge thing because all the system wants is compliance. You are rewarded if you're an inmate, and I speak from personal experience, for compliance, not for making decisions. All the system wants you to do is comply. So when you offer people agency, even if it's a very, very small piece, what do you want to grow? We do this. We do the same thing. We sit down at the beginning of the year, but we include the kitchens. They have which are actually largely inmate populated with what do you want in the garden? Because from site to site, it's different what people want. So they make a lot of decisions. There's a lot of planning that goes on that the students are doing the planning. We have the tools, they do the planning, they decide what they're going to grow. On the women's facility, we're going to grow a lot of flowers. They want flowers. It also helps control food access in the central garden. But this is agency. As little as it seems, any agency is a huge thing. Improving the visual landscaping. This is becoming more and more something that is very important to people when we talk to our students about making the concrete, modifying the concrete environment. There are several, we primarily in the women's facility work in the minimum security facility, which has a 12,000 square foot garden. In the medium facility, which is more secure, only one unit has a garden, and it's about 400 feet, and they can only grow flowers. So, so now it's like, how do you spread? How do you say, hey, we have this one garden, it's a flower garden, there's been no problems. All the other units, can we put this in? Improving the visual landscape, because I've been told by some of the students in the medium facility that we have gray weather up here. For 6 months of the year, it rains and it's gray. It doesn't rain hard, but it's gray. So you're in a gray building, looking at gray concrete, looking at a gray fence, and they tell me they hallucinate colors because it's such a sensory deprived environment that making modifications to the hardscape becomes very important. We're building a meditation garden as soon as we can get a designer in for the ladies, because they've requested it. In OSP, in the maximum security unit, they have a meditation garden that the inmates raised the money for. The inmates raised $75,000 to build a formal meditation garden. And they have that, and now it's medium wants to do something. So you have agency, you have including the hardscape, improving the diets. Better nutrition is a big thing for everybody. People know what they're eating. I mean, you don't know, we've had numerous lawsuits up here over the quality of the food in Oregon, and being able to offer food, and yes, gardeners get to snack, but the idea of moving, like at one site, to get to the kitchen, you have to move the food down the main corridor. So literally, when we're harvesting, people will be carrying bags of produce through the facility, and they will be stopped by the other inmates to go, what's in the bags? Oh, look, there's tomatoes. I had this very odd conversation with a CO, which said, he said that you're turning them into gourmet snobs. And I'm like, that's interesting. You want to explain that one to me? He said, they're sitting in the cafeteria discussing different kinds of tomatoes. What tastes good? Have you tried the chocolate cherries? Oh no, the indigo Cherokees. They're discussing tomatoes. And I'm going, considering some of the conversations I've heard around here about the finer points of making, methamphetamine, I think this is a healthy conversation. And he's like, it's just plain weird. It's like, no, it's not. If, people on the outside, like to garden, pro-social behavior. We have, in a system that's very segregated, self-segregated by race for protection, we tend to have groups of people from different groups. We have a large Native American population that gardens. We have a large Latino population that joins our program. Mirabai is working on improving the Black participation, because while this state is primarily white, of course, minorities are grossly overrepresented when you prorate it out by by the segments of the population in the prison system. So we are trying to be very inclusive, and in order to do that, we need to make sure that we can all work together. We have never had a fight in the history of the program. We've had a couple of guys removed for contraband, but we've never had any fights, which in the male side is highly regarded. That we are at the point where I have been told that they count on 200 inmate AICs, adults in custody, a year being on good behavior because they want to stay in the program. So, you talk about like being embedded. We are only as embedded as they let us be. And it's so different from site to site. If somebody changes, you've got to go back in and do the whole thing again. And then the needs are the same across the 3 programs: more educational material, helping people get job placements, and generally contributing to skill sets, hard and soft skill sets. And this is what we need. It's great to see a community out there of people doing this work. We had once tried to set up a directory, which we're going to try to reset up, though you guys have done a wonderful job. I looked at that list of people so we can exchange information. This whole conversation between the 3 of us started with Sharon making a kind of random phone call to me, or it was an email, I don't remember. And it was like, oh, you're going to be in Portland, come on over. And we actually went into the facilities. We went into 2 of the facilities, and it was so exciting to meet people that are doing this. And, I'm fortunate in that Oregon, we've been around for so long and we are fairly embedded, but it is always a fight. Security changes, then you have to reconvince the new security group that it's not going to be a problem. And I would love to see it spread, because I always get into dialogues about people that, even though people have done bad things, what do we owe to people we incarcerate? If you take them out, and you lock them up, do we owe them anything? I don't want people to go in and come out worse. It didn't help me to be incarcerated, and it was a long struggle. It took me well into my 40s. I was incarcerated when I was very young to stabilize after that. And I did it out of a state of rage because I was so angry because everybody wrote me off. I don't want that for those people. I want people to come out and feel that they have a better chance, that they can be better, that there are other alternatives.
Maybe that is a good closing word. Since we only have 15 minutes left, I will stop sharing now, and maybe we can open the floor for some discussion.
That's great. Is there any discussion?
Well, so I would invite the audience to either use the chat function to ask a question, or use the raised hand, or just to unmute and leave it to the panelists to moderate the questions.
Rima, during your talk, someone did ask a question. I think when you were talking about the juvenile facility, you were describing as maybe there weren't lights in that juvenile facility, and somebody was asking about the legality of that, I guess.
Is that even legal? What they have is it's the adult jail. It's the top floor, and the windows are those 3-inch glass brick windows that are opaque. So yes, they are technically legal. They are a county pre-adjudication, like a jail. They're not a prison, they're a jail. And the requirements are different. And also, this is a very poor small county. Is it legal? I don't have a clue. I was horrified. You have kids who can be there for up to 9 months who can't see the outside. They have like basketball hoops on the roof, and in order to stop the adult inmates from seeing them, they built plywood around it. I don't know if this is legal. It's horrifying. But because they have these windows, these opaque glass strip windows, it's legal. Is it healthy? No. In juvenile facilities, the lights stay on 24 hours a day because of suicide watches. Yeah, how about that? In a juvenile detention facility, the lights are on in the cells 24 hours a day, at least in Oregon, for suicide prevention purposes. Can you imagine that, being in a cell block, a full security cell block, and you're 15 years old and the lights are on all the time? It's crazy. You know, legal or not, it's insane. So yes, as long as you have some light source, it is legal in Oregon. And this is because it's county controlled as opposed to state controlled or federal controlled. There's a whole bunch of different regulations. But that's why the classroom had no windows. No windows in a classroom. That's why we brought the light boxes in. And oddly enough, all the desks started shifting over to where the light boxes were. The kids were able to move the desks. You know, it's barely legal, but remember that in most states, the Department of Correction is, in most cases, that what they are committed to is a good faith effort. And we can all have a discussion about what that means, because I have the feeling it changes from place to place.
Okay, thanks. Someone has their hand up also in the audience. Would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
This is Azura Crispino. Were you calling on me?
Yes. Sorry, your name was cut off.
Oh, so I'm with Prison Abolition Prisoner Support. We're a pen pal to prisoners organization. And as I was listening to your research, the story of one of my pen pals came to me. So his name is Shanatli Alvaro Luna Hernandez. And in the 1980s, he helped to lead a general work stoppage at Estelle Prison in Texas in a way that was really important towards bringing some changes to Texas prisons. And at the time, incarcerated people were required to farm in the prison, and then all the food would be sold basically for profit. And that was part of what led him to strike. And so I know that many of you were talking about the incarcerated people keeping, you know, some portion of the food or the entirety of the food, or that even if the food was sold, that it was being used to buy shoes in a way that would benefit the community. And I guess I'm just concerned, you know, to what extent, and I know that this is none of your intentions, but is it possible that a return to gardening in a carceral context could return incarcerated people to working, you know, in plantation style conditions? That is what caused those kinds of work stoppages in the 80s.
Well, for us, all our programs are voluntary. Gardening jobs are jobs you apply for. Of course, they don't pay anything. I think it's 25 cents an hour in here. But and we don't deal with any for-profit prisons. I will not deal with that, because that's just slavery. So
yes, and in our research, we differentiate from, we are following food activists and differentiate between prison labor that is sold out for corporations or prison farms that are producing large scale for own food production. We are really talking therapeutic gardening, I think, and educational gardening.
I just want to say that in the case of Tutwiler, for example, one of the things that we negotiated for was that the food be consumed by the woman.
Right.
And that was actually important. So there was no discussion of selling, no profit, it was just for consumption. So I think when we go to do these gardens, we need to be certain about what we're negotiating and agreeing to.
Right. In Oregon, food that isn't used is donated. And yeah, it's a fine line. We always worry about that. But, you know, like I said, you know, for us, it's internally getting the food used internally. And it's been a struggle over the years to convince kitchen coordinators to use the food. No, I'll just open a bag of frozen stuff. It's easier. At one point, we were washing all the produce before it went in the kitchen, even though there was a kitchen staff to do that. But yeah, the intent is for the food to be used within the facilities as much as to influence that in our case. But the food that was sold was in Brazil. And it was to buy shoes for the kids. And that's South America and Central America prisons are a totally different ball of wax. Yeah, Brenda's done some work also outside of the country. But no, I worry about that. I mean, people get paid 25 cents an hour to do a job, but in Oregon, in most sites, it's a job. People sign up to become gardeners. It's a premium job. Yeah, voluntary is important. Yeah.
Mark, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I think maybe some of it just got answered a little bit, but I just wondered if each of the programs would just speak a little bit about what the biggest hindrance is to getting the food into the kitchens.
All right, let me jump in for Tutwiler and say a little bit, and then I guess some of my colleagues from Tutwiler can help me out. So one of the biggest hindrance to the kitchen was when we were in an annex, and the kitchen is in the main building. And sometimes when the food leaves the annex to the main building, somewhere between those two, I guess the food disappears sometimes. So I think that's a challenge. That's one challenge, is ensuring that the food gets to where it needs to go. And to deal with that, sometimes, like in the case of the broccoli, it was cooked in the microwave down in the annex, right? The inmates didn't want to take the risk of trying to send it to the main kitchen, because chances are broccoli was so scarce. It has been so long since they had some fresh broccoli. There was a high probability it would not have made it back down to the annex. So one of the things we negotiated is that the woman be allowed to cook some of those produce in their microwaves in their area there. And that has helped, because that's one of the challenge we face, is sometimes some of the food does not make it back down. That's a big challenge.
And I think just to follow up on Dr. Gill about the annex. So the annex is sometimes referred to as the honors dorm. So it's separate from the main facility, and so it doesn't have the same infrastructure. And so the food does disappear. And the women are concerned that if it is sent up, that they won't see it again. And so we were involved in ongoing conversations with the staff at Tutwiler to try to see if we could get freezers or washing stations down at the annex so the food could stay and the women could almost guarantee they would get the food. So a lot of the problem there is just structural at Tutwiler with the food disappearing.
And for Ohio, I can say the problem with the food is there is no kitchen. There is really literally no kitchen. The facility relies entirely on industrially supplied food by one of the top providers. And we could organize a little grant from the University of Akron. So Andrea had a portable sink and got some supplies, but now due to COVID, this is hopefully being repurposed. I'm in the process of repurposing that for the new garden site. We'll see how it goes, but there is no structure.
But I also want to say, just before COVID, we had already completed a training for food handling, because one of the things we were trying to see how we can get the woman to handle the food. Like in the case of the tomatoes don't need to be cooked. It can be chopped with some herbs and made some beautiful salads. So we wanted to see how we can work with the prison so that everything does not have to be sent to the main kitchen. So we were still negotiating and working through that when COVID hit. So we're hoping that once COVID ends and we go back in, we can see how how and what we can work out in terms of food consumption by the woman without having everything go to the kitchen and some disappear.
In Oregon, everything has to go to the kitchen. The gardeners are allowed to snack on food when they work in the garden, but if they remove it from the garden and it doesn't go to the kitchen, it's contraband. So, but it's basically for us, it's working with the the food service managers to make sure that they have the food usable. You know, you win when we had in a meeting, the physical plant manager said, anything you don't want to use in the kitchen to the food service coordinator, tell me, I'll take it to the food bank. And she goes, if it comes out of the garden, it goes in the kitchen. There is no discussion. Nothing is leaving this premises. But it's strictly up to the food service coordinator what happens to the food. So our education goes to the staff too. You know, trying to work with the staff to make it easier. Do we need to wash produce? What do we need to do to make this more accessible? What do we grow? So.
Right, and we have so many more unanswered questions here in the chat, but I think this indicates that this presentation, with its, both the depth of the individual programs and also the scope across different states, has really opened up a lot of both informative information and further questions, I think some of which will continue to be explored in future presentations. So
can we get some of the questions?
Yes, go ahead.
Just a question for you. Can we get some of the questions so maybe we can answer them?
Yeah, they're on the chat. Yep, they're on the chat.
You could answer it over the break,
Yep.
because you have a way to write the answers.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
And we're also going to put a link to the conference networking form in the chat as well. So you can follow up if you put your information in there, you can follow up with other people as well. So on that note, thank you again to this team of presenters. And we will take a 15-minute break. We're going to leave the meeting here open, so please do stay on, but we encourage you to turn off your video, take a stretch, really use this as a real break. We have 2 more excellent presentations to engage with, so we hope that you'll stay with us and be with us for those. And again, feel free to continue answering questions or discussions in the chat here. And also I'll put the link to the conference networking form. So thank you all, and see you in around 15 minutes at 2:45 Eastern time. And we'll see you soon. Have a good break.
Thank you.
Can you see the stuff?
The chat?
Yeah.
The questions.
Well, Rebecca's here. Becky's here.
There are some interesting questions in the chat.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I have been asking too, that we have been a little concerned about, and I was hoping that when we get back, because for some reason the inmates like to talk with me, it's no boast, it's just a fact, and I like to mingle with them, because what it does, it allows you to hear, like sometimes they say, I want to join the garden, but I have to go to so.
Yeah.
Because they have so many other things. But there's a question about why we don't have more Blacks involved in the garden. And it's something that is of interest to me, because I'm a Black person. And at the prison, we really do not see a lot of engagement of Black people in the garden. And as a sociologist, of course, it is very interesting to me. And I would like to, when I mingle with those people, I really want to ask some of those African-American people why they're not more interested in the garden. I'm really hoping that we can get some answers to that question, because it's very, very stark, something that stands out. We had maybe 2 or 3 persons who used to come just sometimes, very, very, very few persons of African-American race who get it.
Yeah, you should send me an email, because I have a bunch of stuff on that and I'm working on a program to change that. And it has to do with addressing some historical issues, some structural issues, and then integrating Black Futures Farm and Black Food Sovereignty Coalition.
Hey guys, I'm taking a break, but I have saved the chat file and emailed it to us so we can follow up later.
Yeah, good idea.
Brenda, just an interesting thing. It's also a matter for us of who the volunteers are. Because I'm Native American, when I go to a facility, we get Native Americans. It's a matter of, if all of our volunteers and all our instructors are white, what's
But
the
also,
message?
it's also a matter of having a history of slavery in this country and agriculture being associated with, working the land under duress and brutality. There's a lot of research. If you want to get into this, Brenda, just email me. I have a bunch of stuff and I'm working on making changes around this.
All right, so Maribel, I know that discussion because it's part of my research, but I wanted to hear from.
And it's also wonderful that we have so many new faces and folks joining us today as well. And
dialogue around this issue that has for so long been ignored. There are a lot of organizations and a lot of people doing work in different areas around prison conditions and decarceration, but food isn't something that gets talked about a lot. And oftentimes when people are doing really fantastic initiatives that have to do with food, like so many of the people who have been presenting in this conference so far, those efforts are really siloed. There hasn't been enough of a space for people to come together and really have a wider discussion or dialogue around this issue. So that's what we're trying to do. And our first effort with the Food in Prison Project was to do some research on what's the state of prison food in the United States right now. What is the experience of eating while incarcerated? So starting in 2018, we started an 18-month investigation of the prison food experience. And you can find the results of our investigation in our report, Eating Behind Bars, Ending the Hidden Punishment of Food in Prison. It's a 6-part report. It addresses various aspects of this critical issue. So everything from what's on the tray to what we call the prison food machine, the operations aspect of it, to thinking about how can we move forward. We really tried to center the voices of people who've experienced incarceration firsthand and their loved ones. We also conducted interviews and site visits with corrections staff and agency leaders from around the country. We also talked with experts who are trying to transform food in other institutional settings like schools or hospitals. We talked with people who are correctional dietitians, and again, really tried to get a bigger picture of this this whole issue. So it's a very long report. It's about 127 pages. And just to summarize it for you all in 2 sentences, the prison food experience harms and dehumanizes, and we can and must do better. And that's what this really all boils down to. So the typical prison diet is really unhealthy. The food is often unappealing. It's sometimes unsafe. The diet is really high in sodium and sugar and refined carbohydrates. It tends to be low in fresh fruits and vegetables, quality proteins. Basically, it's the diet that we have all been told for decades to avoid. And sometimes this food is, coming into facilities labeled not fit for human consumption. The environment in which people are eating can be really rushed, really loud, nerve-wracking, uncomfortable, crowded. It can feel dangerous. If people are eating alone in their cells, it can feel really, alienating and undignified. And all of these things basically send a message both to and about incarcerated people that those people are less than human. So that message and all of these different aspects of the prison eating experience has profound impacts on physical and mental and emotional health. And these are both short-term and lasting impacts that can follow people long after they've been released. And our panelists will talk about some of their experiences and observations in just a few minutes. And these impacts also ripple out beyond just the people who've experienced incarceration directly, also to their families and to communities and to our society as a whole. Incarceration doesn't happen in a vacuum. So when these things impact people directly, those effects also ripple out. And the real problem here, the big underlying issue that's important to recognize, is that we are a country that simply locks up too many people. And we're talking now about better food. How do we improve food in correctional facilities? better food isn't magically going to fix a carceral system that is inherently rooted in racism and inhumane practices. But a lot of times I think we get very overwhelmed by this idea of decarceration and looking at it as this process that's going to take a long time, whether we want it to or not. And that can be really overwhelming. So looking at food is an aspect of this massive issue that we can actually do something about now. There are ways that we can change this. And one of the really great things is that food sits at the intersection of all these different movements that are very active. So that means we have a lot of different allies, and there are so many approaches that one can take to improving food in prisons. And those improvements have, again, benefits on the individual level in terms of physical and mental health, in terms of social and behavioral health, in terms of when people go back to their families, family and community health, and also ecological health, right? Prison food can be really destructive to the environment. And one of the people that you'll hear from today, Mark McBride, has done a lot to really improve that environmental aspect in his facility. So in closing, where do we begin? And that's one of those things that our panelists will talk about today, is this idea of what are some of the steps that we can take to really improving the food situation as we're moving towards decarceration. And one of the themes of this conference is reducing recidivism. And it's really important to note that it's not just about re-examining the policies that govern why people are sent back to prison, because there are definitely some problems there, especially when people are being sent back for a simple parole violation. They haven't made it to a meeting with their officer on time because they were working or they had to pick up their child, or there are so many policies in place that are creating this context for what is seen as recidivism. But also it's about creating context and building spaces, whereas the folks from BPI who presented yesterday were talking about building transformative spaces where humanity is recognized. And that's what we can really do here. Food is a really powerful tool for building humanity, recognizing each other's humanity. So our panelists are going to talk a little bit about their work, their visions, and really using food as a point of intervention to really address this issue of mass incarceration. So if you give me one moment, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if we can get our panelists all up here in the spotlight as well. Thank you. Perfect, thank you so much. All right, so panelists, we're going to go ahead and give you all the floor. And the first question I'm going to toss out to the group is, what physical, mental, and emotional impacts of the prison food experience have you experienced or observed? So Tara, I see you nodding. So do you want to go ahead and go first?
I'm always willing to speak first. I have so much to say, but I'm going to keep it short so that I can share the space with the other panelists. Physically, first I think it's important to disclose that I am a formerly incarcerated professional in the working in criminal justice reform, and I think it's fascinating that our organization at Impact Justice planned to pursue examining food in prison. And I just really wanted to sort of bring my lived experience for being incarcerated for 15 plus years to the work for my colleagues to really be able to capture some of those experiences that incarcerated individuals face. I would first and foremost talk about the physical aspect of the food experience, and that is definite malnutrition. A lot of individuals experience gastritis, digestive problems, high blood pressure, diabetes, even renal failure. And those are some of the most common conditions that tend to happen for individuals on a physical level because of the high content of salt and other preservatives when it comes to the quality of food. Mentally, it gets a little bit more deep. And this is where we talk about understanding as an incarcerated individual that food is going to be used as either a reward or a punishment. And what I mean by that is if an individual, for example, had a disciplinary incident during the daytime, they may not be released to go to dinner. And so they use that as a punishment, and they also use it as a form of reward, meaning if you work a little bit extra, or if you volunteer to help the correctional officers, you may get an extra meal. And so this type of a practice that's done informally oftentimes does create the mental strain that you have to earn your food. And that can be a very big psychological concern. Emotionally, I would say that it is a serious concern for individuals that are in custody, because you oftentimes digest that emotion as if you are not worthy or you don't deserve, and it becomes very insidious to believe in these things, and it impacts you emotionally.
Thanks so much, Tara. Who would like to jump in next?
I'll piggyback off of Tara, what she just said, and to go even a little bit deeper when you're talking about conditions of confinement in food. If you are in isolated confinement or solitary confinement on 23-hour lockdown, we like to call it, but typically for a lot of people it's 24-hour lockdown, your last meal of the day can be at 4 p.m., possibly 5 p.m., the latest. And the part that's key with that is the fact that you cannot put a piece of bread to the side. You cannot put some food to the side for later, because what happens is if the officers decide to come into your cell and search your cell, you'll catch a disciplinary report for every food item you have in your cell. So now your stay in that 23-hour lockdown is extended. This is why it's so easy to go into the SHU, but it's hard to get out, because you get disciplinary reports of having extra toilet paper, an extra toothbrush, an extra slice of bread, all the basic things that we can sometimes take for granted out here every day. And we like to talk about food deserts, but we don't look at the place that has the biggest food desert, which is prison. It's as was mentioned by Tara, like it's tearing down a lot of humans. And I've watched it with my own eyes over the course of the time I was incarcerated myself. And it's funny because I was fortunate in like going to an institution. I was in Clinton, Dannemora. And when I went to Clinton in the annex, we had food that we can get from the local farmers market. So we could get 35 pounds of like fresh food, vegetables, chicken, you name it. We can get literally 35 pounds of packages of food every month from these local markets that were owned by the officers, I might add. It was owned by the officers. So this is why that food flow and that business was never really probably disrupted, because of the fact that like one of the officers was one of the owners of this market in Clinton, Dannemora. But we were able to have fresh food, and I was able to cook because we had stoves there. I was able to cook and be lost in that meal. So a lot of us don't realize that when we're going through that struggle, sometimes the things that are right in front of us can help us temporarily like just suppress what we might be going through. And it ultimately landed me stop eating prison food when I was there. I stopped eating beef. I stopped eating a lot of different things when I was there, because I didn't know what it would do to my body, because I've seen a lot of people getting sick around me. I've seen people dying around me. And food is very key, and it's big in society. If we care about educating people who are in prison, and I like to say people, because I've heard that term inmate used a lot real loosely. Let's start looking at people as people who are in prison. This is why we're able to look at them from a humanizing perspective, when we're able to look at them as a son, a daughter, a mother, a father, rather than looking at them as an inmate. We have to look at them as people so we can get them the services and the adequate food to them so that they can survive. So I'll stop there.
Our residents, even before I started to work to make some changes, didn't have the same kind of situation that Roy and Tara have mentioned, but I'm a firm believer that our food system nationally for a lot of institutions, even schools and other things, it's not a real healthy situation. And obviously that carries over into incarceration. when I first started, there were many instances where someone would get their tray and come up and just decide to dump it in the trash and head on back to their unit or their dorm. And we wanted to try to work to make a change for this. And we just really tried to think about what could be a way that we could do it. We are limited by budgets, but you know, I've mentioned in other presentations that I tried to look at it like I did with my family. We had to make choices, and we decided to really take a whole food approach and try to break things down and make things from scratch. And we use that same type of a method, and it's really seemed to make a difference.
Great. And Mark, I'm going to ask you to talk in a few minutes just about some more detail of the programs and the work that you've done at Mountain View. But can you tell a little bit about the impacts that people have mentioned in terms of their health since you've switched over the food to the way that you do it?
As far as a formal tracking, there has been no formal work to look at this, but I can tell you that when I walk down the hallways, the residents will stop me and thank me, thank the staff for what we've been able to do. You know, we changed over from the white Wonder bread type of buns and hot dog rolls and different products that we had to baking all our own homemade bakery products with the help of being able to get some organic grains from a supplier here in the state, Maine Grains, that allows us to get what they call run-of-the-mill flour. And this has just made such a difference in the fact of, I mean, if you've all experienced the Wonder Bread type of styrofoam bun or whatever, it you know, it wouldn't matter what you put on it, it wouldn't be very nutritious, and that's made a big difference. You know, we have captains that are at our facility that have been here for over 20 years that will mention to me on several occasions how much it means just to have the residents go back to their units, back to their dorms, having had a good meal. It just changes their whole perspective. It makes for a lot better behavior situation for the rest of the night. And, you know, that's what we've really tried to work towards.
Thank you. And, you know, I want to go back to what Tara and Roy were saying about all of those physical and mental and emotional impacts that they've experienced or that they've observed. And could you all talk a little bit about how you've seen those experiences ripple out beyond just the individual who's been incarcerated, but also affect families and communities and the bigger picture of our society?
I'm always happy to go first. You know, we had a unique experience, and I'll probably start with this so I can segue into what this means in our cultural fabric. And I think it really impacted me in such a way upon my release. I got an opportunity to do a prison tour in one of our California state prisons. And we were just getting ready to explore food in prison. And so I was really focused on wanting to speak with many of the workers, the cooks that are staff members over the prison kitchens. And I think one of the opportunities of being free was that no one knew that I was formerly incarcerated. And so they were able to be a lot candid with me. And I had actual experience of working in the prison kitchen. So I knew a lot of terminology. And so I approached this individual still knowing what I'm going after and yet being able to be sort of naive in my approach. And I just wanted to understand the quality of food in their eyes and in their perspective. And I asked the question quite straightforward of what was the quality of the food like? And the response that I received was that it's good enough for anyone that's incarcerated. And I remember being baffled by that statement because it was so frank, it was so, given freely, that they believed the food quality was actually low, and yet for someone that's incarcerated, it was appropriate. And so this kind of just ties into the way a lot of individuals in the community look at individuals who commit crime. They feel as though, a part of their sentence is to have poor quality conditions in prison, including food. And this sort of spills out into a lot of the stereotypes and the way that we view what is appropriate, right? No one should be given poor quality food, whether they're in a third world country, whether they're incarcerated, whether they're from a poor community. It does not matter. Everyone should have a right to have good quality food. And then I was continuing on to probe and ask if they had ever tried the food. And he said he would never dare. And so that just lets you know that they clearly recognize that this is poor quality food. They believe, or at least they validate that it is appropriate for someone because they are incarcerated and it is part of their punishment. And yet that type of mentality ripples effect all the way out into our community.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back to like when, as a co-founder of Drive Change, which is a nonprofit which uses the food industry to train, employ, and mentor the formerly incarcerated young people. When Jordan and I launched this organization back in 2013, we realized that food could be the unifier. Food could be the one thing that could help people coming home from jail and from prisons convert back into society and live a life, hopefully a productive, law-abiding citizen life. We felt like food was the conduit. Why? Because for us, we analyzed the food industry. I'm a chef, by the way. And when I met Jordan, I was doing corporate catering around Manhattan. So I was doing corporate catering, doing events, and then I met Jordan, and then we talked about this organization, and we built this food truck. And we decided to only hire formerly incarcerated young people. And that's who we hired. Only young people, only formerly incarcerated. So we launched our organization with 8 young men. And the first year when we launched it in 2014, it was an experience because for us, we thought just employing these young men would be like the major factor in like helping them stay home. But what we didn't factor in were the other underlying issues, right? The issues at home, the food insecurity issues, living in food deserts, like all these things, struggles of like 5 adults living in a 1-bedroom apartment. There were certain social issues that we could not ask our young people to just push through, come to work these 40 hours and ignore that. So we had to bridge the connection. How we bridged that is we started saying, look, we need to get therapists, we need to get counselors in here. We also need to break up this good boys club and bring in our first young ladies. So after the first year of operation, we won the best new food truck in New York City. The second year, we had a conversation. We brought in our first 2 young ladies. And then that second year, we won the best food truck in New York City, right? And it's amazing because we have a business that is fully ran by young people who are formerly incarcerated, who don't have culinary degrees, who didn't go to culinary school, who haven't spent 15 years working in restaurants, and they beat out people who've been in the food industry for 20, 30 years. So it shows you that hard work, diligence, opportunity, more importantly, providing opportunity to our young people, speaking to them and not speaking at them, were deal breakers for us. You have to, I always tell people, you have to meet people where they are. I don't care what it is, just you look at it as you're not selling something to people, but we're always selling something to people. It's all about you meeting people where they're at. And if you're meeting people where they're at, you'll see, instead of saying what's wrong with you, you'll ask, what happened to you? How can I help you? How was it growing up? Do you have, like, how did you get here today? Like, did you have to jump? Did you eat today? I've known people who've spoken on panels, formerly incarcerated people, who had to jump a turnstile to get to the panel discussion to speak at, and then they didn't get paid for it. So it's not just food, it is how we look at people who are impacted by the criminal legal system, and we treat them like objects. Instead of looking at them and using their stories and getting in tune with them, we just like discard them.
Thanks, Roy. And I love that you brought up how you began Drive Change and the reasons that you decided to start that organization. And all three of you have really done some amazing work, both in prisons and outside of prisons, to use food to really try and either change that experience on the inside or to assist with reentry on the outside. So I'm just curious if each of you will talk a little bit about your work and also talk about some of the barriers to change that you came across and how you manage those. So I'm going to kick it back to Tara, because I remember I know you have some stories about some changes you tried to make with food while you were on the inside.
And for some reason, I couldn't get my brain to link up with you at that moment. Yeah, so I think it's really crazy. But when I was in prison, I really wanted to take an advocate stance on everything concerning the conditions. I really worked closely with a lot of the administrative staff to sort of improve the conditions, to introduce other rehabilitative programs, always trying to sort of uplift this very depressing environment. And when I held the position as a chairperson over one of our nonprofit organizations, I organized approximately 40 members to begin doing some surveys in our community. And we really wanted to just gauge everyone's point of view and their experience with the food. And we were not surprised behind the results. Many individuals were often hungry. They were often sick behind the food. And we have found several different things once we began doing these outreach efforts inside the prison, many revealing disturbing situations, such as the dog food that actually arrived and was actually fed to a lot of the women as a meat supplement. We learned about various different problems with the way we can request new food items or fresh food items from our canteen manager, and was constantly denied simply because it would take a little bit of more extra work. And yet there was nothing in the policy that would prevent us from having more fresh food items. It was just a matter of them not wanting to put in the extra work to actually get that going on. And when I worked in canteen, we often were sort of encouraged to continue selling expired items, especially to push those out a little bit further without discounting them or disclosing to individuals that they were expired items. To say why this is important is because once a food item leaves the actual canteen window, they cannot return it. And so they're almost having to take a risk of purchasing food items from the canteen with their own money, knowing that we are selling an expired item and them not ever being able to return it. And so it's those type of things that just really expose the insidious nature of food exchange and profit for the prison industrial complex. It is why eventually I found myself sort of creating and starting my own informal restaurant business inside of prison. And I found myself always trying to gather a lot of kosher food items to create really wholesome meals, and then sort of finding an income to keep that business going. And I always would run out of plates. And no matter how many plates I donated to those that couldn't afford it, it just wasn't enough. And I realized that I was just, trying to save that one starfish with a really big issue that was playing at hand.
Nice. So thinking back with in like Drive Change, and like I said initially, our thought process was if we can train these young people, get them licensed credentials, we can be able to get them employment. So that's how we started our organization. The first 2 years, that's how we operated, right? But what we quickly realized is that we weren't really impacting the larger food space. And the only way we're going to do that if we were going to kind of create some partnerships with certain hospitality groups where we can really take a look at what does it mean to invest in your workers. So we made it bigger than just looking at people who are incarcerated, formerly incarcerated. We started analyzing, hey, how about you just start looking at your workers and like how important it is to invest in your workers, because they will work harder for you. They will work longer for you when they say, when workers, people, us here, I appreciate you, thank you. We work harder for people. But when we feel like we're not appreciated, what happens, right? So what we started having these conversations with these restaurants and having conversations with these managers, and we started a train-the-trainer model. So we started training these restaurant managers on what does it mean to invest in your employees. And then also the catch to it was we were used as the conduit. So now we have a pool of young people who are going through this training, and here you have a pool of young people to hire. But ultimately, we wanted to impact the hospitality space. So what we started doing was on our food truck, we were on tips. We stopped tipping on our food truck. And we said to our young people, we're going to give you a percentage of what we make. So you're going to get paid hourly, $12 an hour. And we're going to give you a percentage of all of what we make in sales at the end of the day. And that's the type of conversations we've been having with other restaurant owners to say, hey, look at your model a little bit differently. Why? Because when you typically go to a restaurant, the person who's front of house, who's coming to take your order, is the beneficiary of the tip. The person in the back of house is not. So what does it look like for equality in a space and treating your workers fairly? And that's part of like the angle we took when we started bringing our young people to these restaurant spaces. And now a lot of them are working as chefs across New York City restaurants, which is great. But like I said, it's all about how do we like impact the ecosystem. We came out with the first farm to food truck in, I think maybe New York City, definitely. I don't know if in America, but we were farm to table. Everything we got on our food truck came within 150 miles of New York City, which was key for us, right? Because now we know where the food was coming from. It wasn't processed. It wasn't coming from a frozen department. It was coming from farmers. So that's how we decided to impact it a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. And continuing along with, what Roy just ended with in terms of not just looking at the social infrastructure, but also the actual ecological infrastructure and where the food is coming from. Mark, I want to pull you back in and have you talk about the gardens and the local procurement that you're doing at Mountain View.
Just to go back a little bit, I think one of the things, if you listen to Tara and Roy, you can kind of see that I think the most important thing that anyone can do that's doing this work is you need to have a passion, and there's no doubt that you can see the passion that they have. And one of the things Roy mentioned was how important it is to train these people and the residents that we have. And I want to echo that, because one of the things, you can have a culinary program and someone can learn certain things, but some of the best people that I have that work on our team as the residents are people that didn't even have any experience in food service. But once they saw the passion that I had and that the other staff that I had kind of, it builds. I mean, I can tell you, if you probably work with Roy for a day, you'd have a hard time not being passionate, or you probably have something wrong. But I try to be that same way, and it is catching. And I think when you do find people where they're at, as Roy mentioned, and give them responsibility, give them training, they all of a sudden, some of these people have not had anything that they were really responsible for and proud of. And when they see what can be accomplished and they see the results, and they go back and they have people in their dorm or unit say, man, that was great. I can't believe that was a great meal you guys did. And then, they'll come back in and give ideas of, do you think we could try this? And, we've had people, a lot of the things that we have that we've been able to incorporate into our menu were ideas that came from residents who, came up with these ideas. And yes, we have to stay within the dietitian's guidelines. We have to, and they understand that, but when you can do this, then that passion grows and they have that same passion, and it just makes such a difference. And you know, I have to be careful in saying this, but there are resident kitchen workers that work in our kitchens that if I lost them, I would I'd be there'd be a greater loss than even maybe some of the staff that I have that is, you know, state employees. And though I have a good staff, I'm just saying it's amazing to see these people who had no background at all take these things on, learn about food safety, learn about the things that we need to do. And I just think that's really important. So I know that wasn't what you wanted me to talk about necessarily, Leslie, but I had to mention that because after just listening to Roy and Tara, it's obvious, I think, that if you care about your work and you're passionate, it does catch. So a little bit about what we do. Again, it's definitely educational. We try not to have this just be that someone comes in the kitchen and works. We started programs that, you know, there's different people. Roy mentioned back of the house, in front of the house. Well, we kind of treat our kitchens the same way as you would in a restaurant. And we have people that are working towards the serving end. We have people that are doing the preparation. We also have work release crews that go out. So we have to prepare meals that go in coolers for people that are going to be away from the facility for the day working at a job. We also have cooks that are going to be preparing the meals. We have bakers that are, you know, with this bakery program that I was able to start, they bake all the bread products, all the desserts, everything is done in-house, and they work towards that. And then the other neat thing is they're able to mentor and train their replacements. I mean, in our system, as much as I say I'd hate to lose these people, obviously our goal is to lose them. Our goal is to have them go out and get jobs, even in work release, and do that, and then eventually to be released for good. So we try to use this type of a model, and this mentoring and training has been very, very successful because, as you know, I learned by doing a lot of times myself, and when they have to train someone, they really learn it then because they're having to replicate this, and that's been very successful. We have, I looked the other day, we have 25 or maybe even a few more than that right now. With COVID, things have slowed down, but we have 25 of our kitchen workers that have worked in the kitchen as cooks and in the baking program that have gone out to work in a local commercial bakery here in the area. And it's pretty neat. I mean, some of them are going to work for the day and they actually, you know, they're making an income that's equivalent a lot of times to what the people at our facility of our staff are making. So it's kind of a neat thing to have that opportunity.
Great, thank you. And I hate to cut this question short of all of you talking about the great work you're doing. You know, I really wanted Tara to have more time to talk about Homecoming Project and some of the food aspects that get pulled in there, and you know, and Roy to talk more about the work that he's doing as a chef, and Mark to talk more about some of what he's doing, you know, environmentally in terms of like reducing food waste and procurement from local farmers. And there just unfortunately isn't enough time for all of that. So also all of these are very public facing people, so you can find much of their work online or articles about them online, which is great. But before we move into a quick audience Q&A, I just wanted for each of you to be able to share with the group, you know, as we're working towards ending mass incarceration and rethinking the way that our nation defines and responds to harm and what is considered acceptable in terms of, you know, the conditions for people who have been considered to have caused harm. What should the prison food experience look like in the interim as we're working towards all of that? It's weird to say ideal prison food experience, right? Because an ideal food experience shouldn't include the word prison, but you know, what do you see as the best way to address this moving forward? What's your vision for that? And so I'll give each of you just a minute or two to respond. And if anyone's ready to go for
I
it.
could just say, I'll just say more education around nutrition. And then not only just educating people about nutrition, but giving them the opportunity to take the front seat. I love prison gardens. I love the way that that is really allowing individuals to grow and understand nutrition in that respect. So I love that there's an education component and there's also a solution in place.
I would probably say remove Department of Corrections out of any dealings with nutritional, food, or anything. I think that it should be an outside, a completely separate entity. And the reason why is because if we know it's coming from a central entity, we know it's not going to be tainted in a way that's going to be used as punishment. I believe that as long as you have corrections involved with certain things, it can always be used as a form of punishment when it comes to being incarcerated in food and what kind of food you get. So I personally believe that there needs to be people on the outside monitoring and overlooking certain aspects. The same thing with medical, right? It should be medical professionals that are coming in dealing with that. It's the same thing when we talk about food. We should not be using processed food as the end all or be all for everyone when we know that it's contributing to the deterioration of their bodies. So I would say that.
I think if I could just come up with one thing, and it may seem trite, but I just think if people in this type of situation were more apt to look at this like, what would you want if you were incarcerated? What would you want if it was your son or daughter that was incarcerated? And if you treated that type of a diet, that type of a meal, I think things could be a lot different.
Thank you. I think, it's so important to hear these visions of what this experience could look like instead. And, there are so many ways that we can make changes, both in, the content of the meals and the way that we're procuring food. And Roy, I hadn't actually heard that idea before of like taking the food actually out of being under control of the DOC and having, I don't know, maybe it's like under the health department or something that, that is maybe running it instead. Or, Tara, every time I hear you talk about your restaurant inside, I think, why is it not a thing that this is actually a program where people are, able to create food and share it with their peers inside and have support, kind of like a kitchen incubator program on the outside. So, there are so many changes that we could make, and so many people during this conference have been talking about their programs and excellent ways to really start making these changes. So it's been great. And I want to make sure we have some time for audience questions. I will give a quick heads up that Tara does have to sign off at 3:40, 5 minutes early. So if you have questions for Tara, definitely get them in the chat up on the earlier side. But yeah, go ahead, throw your questions in the chat and I will try and moderate to our panelists. So the first question from William is it really viable to remove the DOC from providing food? Can we change the way the DOC works?
We know that's not an easy process. We did say what we would like in the interim. That was kind of like my pie in the sky hope. I believe, though, that with these studies and the work that a lot of you are doing on this call, I like to believe that we live in a society which is big on studies all the time. Everything's about a study. Oh, we'll just do another study and a study and a study. It comes a time when you stop doing studies and you start doing the work. And we know that the conditions of food in prison has been a problem for a very long time. It's like, this is not a secret to anyone. So for me, when I look at an outside, whether it's an auditor, whoever, I think it's the same thing when you're thinking about policing, right? You have a police officer that kills someone. You don't want the police officers be the one that are investigating the scene, right? You want someone outside with clean eyes who don't have that personal involvement with it. And I believe that by having an outside entity providing food, hopefully that's fresh, especially in this day and age that's farm fresh, I would like to believe that it can help, or even give more of that funding as well to farmers, because a lot of these prisons and institutions are located in places where there are nothing but farms all around the institutions. A lot of those farmers are not benefiting behind those facilities being in their communities either. So that was my little, that's what my hope is in time. But right now we got to operate under the constraints of the DOC.
Thanks, Roy, and thanks for your question, William. Other questions, just feel free to throw them in the chat. And I have other questions I can throw to the panelists if no one else has questions. Okay, we've got one from Raquel from Roots of Success Environmental Literacy and Work Readiness Program. Would love to hear about our great work and share more of our program. Is that directed, who's that directed at, Raquel?
I think that was just a shout out.
Oh, okay. Great. So as we're waiting to see if there are more questions that come in, I'm curious if any of you would like to spend a few minutes talking about, you know, this really is an issue of environmental justice, of racial justice, of economic justice, and I'm just wondering if any of you have any, you know, thoughts or comments that you'd like to make on that topic.
I would love to chime in a little bit really quickly. For me, a lot of first of all, I believe that all of our systems that are built right now are built on systems of oppression, institutional racism. So I believe that first we identify that there are problems in all of these systems, whether it be food, whether it be incarceration, whether it be child welfare, immigration. All of these systems were built to discriminate against a subsector of people. The first thing I think we need to do is elevate the voices of those who are impacted by those systems. Kind of like having myself and Tara on this as being people who are on the inside and now being people on the outside. I always believe that the answers to a lot of problems that are happening are rooted in the people who are going through the discrimination, who are going through the struggle, but they don't have the platform or the opportunity to say, hey, this is how we can get out of this. So I believe it's all on you as well to continue to elevate the voices and stories of people who are most impacted, because I believe that when you share a story, it brings out the humanity in a person. It doesn't bring out the humanity in me as the person that's sharing the story, but what it does is it allows you, I tap into your humanity so you can relate to my story. And that's what the power of storytelling is all about. So it's really all about how do we continue to invest in human capital? How do we look at people who commit crimes as people and not inmates, not felons, not a robber, a murderer? How do we start continuing to humanize those people? Because if we're doing this work and we're using that language, it's toxic. We can't expect the rest of the world to respect our struggle if we're using language that's toxic to what we're doing. So I just thought I'd let you guys know that because I'm big on language and the language that we use when we describe people.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you so much. And you're getting shout outs in the chat window too. Tara, since I know you have to go in a few minutes, I want to give you a chance to say anything else you'd like to share.
Yeah, I wanted to share a little bit about some of the trauma that is associated with individuals returning home from prison. I have the pleasure of working to provide housing and some wraparound services to individuals who have served long-term sentences inside of custody. And the program is innovative in its nature. You know, community hosts who own their own home, who have an extra bedroom, are opening up their doors to allow someone that's formerly incarcerated. After we screen them and vet them, we match them with a host, and they are provided housing paid for by Impact Justice for 6 months. But throughout that time, it's really important to educate our hosts, who oftentimes do not have any experience with the criminal justice system, to understand what their participant may be going through. So really being able to talk about the reentry population. In particular, we have a lot of issues and concerns that come up in regards to food. Number one, you know, not knowing how to cook food, being overwhelmed by the options of food, not knowing how to shop for food, not knowing how to store food. We work with a couple of local food banks, which assist us with providing our participants with healthier meals, and then actually learning how to prepare these food items. But post-incarceration syndrome is very real, and individuals that are returning home from prisons are oftentimes, more than not trustworthy of other people cooking food unless they can watch it because of their experiences in prison. And so we just always meet our clients where they're at and ensuring that they are being, their needs are being met and their traumas are being acknowledged.
Thank you, Tara. I think that's a really important point. And I know you have to go in a minute, so thank you so much for joining us for this panel today.
Thank you, everyone. Talk soon.
Thank you, Tara.
Roy, you're getting a question from Erica about, okay, you're answering that in the chat. Do you want to say a few words about?
Yes. I see some things that were popping up. I was trying to respond to one that I'm like, the first one was like, it was how can we establish a larger platform? I was putting there's no short answer to that question, but we can talk more about that.
So your next question.
As far as opening up the program to more gender friendly, and many of you don't know, Jordan is the founder and visionary of Drive Change, and Jordan is non-gender conforming. And the last couple of years, Drive Change has been doing a lot of different catering events around like gender and around like gender identity and things like that. So you can look up the Drive Change, go on the drivechange.org website, and you can learn more about that information on what Drive Change is doing now.
Great, thank you, Roy. And I'm seeing a question about what state city is the housing program in. So the program that Tara was just talking about is called the Homecoming Project. It's run through Impact Justice, and it's currently in California in the Bay Area. If you're interested, you can just Google Homecoming Project at Impact Justice, and you'll find plenty of information about it. And I do know that the Homecoming Project and Tara are really working on trying to expand that right now. So if you're interested, please, reach out, and it's something that Impact Justice is really hoping to expand. Mark, I want to give you a chance to share any final words that you'd like to share while we're waiting to see if there are any last questions.
One of the questions I got, just a direct question that came in, was, do we have a Serve Safe program to give certificates to our resident kitchen workers? And we do have that program. It's been really good for them to be able to not only just to get the certification, but to have a good understanding of food safety and what's needed and important. And it gives them a good opportunity when they go out to have that certification, whether they're going to work in a restaurant or any type of food service industry. Well, I don't know, Leslie, you got any good ideas of something you'd like me to key on? I mean,
can you talk a little bit about the food waste and how you've decreased that with your food? I think that's just a really important ecological aspect that would be great to touch on.
Yes, a few years back, the warden at MSP, who's now our commissioner, Randall Liberty, had asked me to come down to MSP. They were having a situation with really high tipping fees, and found out through the waste providers, the people that were picking up the waste, that food was a big part of the weight that was involved. And we ended up working and coming up with a plan, and it was able to save thousands of dollars at their facility. And we also have been doing the same thing at our facility. It's not only important for the fact that we're saving a lot of money that was just being dumped into the waste stream, but it's also provided a very usable product with the compost that we use in our gardens. And we try to obviously cut down. We've worked to really diminish waste, period. And we try to, if we have vegetables, we have things that are left from one meal, cool things down in a food safety manner that's going to make sure that they're good. And then we'll work that into soups and things that we have in with other products. And I know sometimes people use terms, like thinking that you're just going to get a correctional soup that's just a bunch of things that are terrible, but really it's no different than what we would do in a restaurant, just to be able to take these items that are good, and it's a lot better to have a good soup made with these type of things than it is having, we may substitute that out for, say, chips or something, and give them a soup that has vegetables and potatoes and, say, chicken or whatever in it. And it's been a pretty big hit for us.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, so I am getting the message that our panel is about out of time. So just to close up, thank you so much, Mark and Roy, and again, Tara, even though she has now signed off. Oh, we're getting a question about what are the priorities of transforming food in prison? We could talk about that all day. Yes, and commissary I'm seeing now is also very important. Again, we talk about a lot of these things in our report, so please feel free to look at our report on the Impact Justice website. We have 127 pages of detail and information. I'm also happy to talk anyone's ear off about this issue at any point in time. You can reach out to me, lsobel@impactjustice.org. My contact information will also be on the sheet that the organizers are sending out after the conference. So thank you all so much for joining us for this session today. Many thanks to the other presenters, to our panelists, to the conference organizers as well. This has been really wonderful. So thank you all so much.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us for this really excellent, informative panel and discussion here. And as you may have saw in the chat, that if you're interested in this topic, there is, and I think that we've advertised this in previous emails, but there is a track specifically about food in corrections by the Farm to Institution Northeast Farm to Institution Summit, and there's a link to learn more about that. But thanks again to our presenters here, and we do hope that everyone here will stick around. You know, in the first 3 days of this conference, there's been a lot of use of the word therapeutic in talking about spaces or programmings of some kind, and our next presenters are coming up at 4 p.m. Eastern time after our break, are gonna, you know, really walk us through like what does that actually mean as, you know, specifically from a design perspective of what does it mean to actually have a therapeutic space. And so please do stick around. This final session coming up will not be recorded, so please do stick around if you're interested in that topic, if you're available to. And at this point, we will take our break and we will return